She hesitated to even look at me. I could have said the same. She said that she worked at a small bar in Juarez and that her son stayed home while she worked the night shift. One night, the worst happened. While she was cleaning up the bar that night, she began to hear the broken glass, the blood-choked screams, silence, and death. Crouching under the bar, she knew what she had to do, for she was the only survivor and the only witness of the mafia attack that ensued that night. About a week later, the worst happened yet again. While she was boarding a bus with her son to escape Juarez, a man came up to her. He told her that she had to die, but there was another option. As long as she never showed her face in that area again, he would be able to go back to the people that sent him and tell them that she was dead, because they would not know the difference. Hanging her head to cry, she could not finish the story. Even though she had finished telling the story, though, I was still stuck in it. I was kind of frozen in the moment. You know that feeling when maybe a loved one just died, or you have a lot of work piled up, or you have some crushing realization, and you're just kind of frozen? Well, that's what I was feeling. But I was even more concerned about the fact that I couldn't even shed a tear. Because while she was telling her story, the painful thing going through my mind was that I would be back on the US side of the border in a matter of hours. And I didn't know if she would be either. What I'm trying to tell you is that this whole story boils down to empathy. And empathy is the ability to feel someone else's emotions. It's different from sympathy in that you actually feel the emotions of the person that you're with. So a sympathetic person might say to a person that's crying, "Oh, it's okay." An empathetic person would cry with them. And before we go on, and you don't have to answer, I'd like to ask, why do we even need empathy? What's the point? Why should we want to feel the struggles of other people? And I think the simple answer, at least for me, is that there's a distinct lack of empathetic people in the world. And I'll give an example of this. So it was a normal day for me. I was on break. I was kind of living it up. I was about to go hit golf balls at the driving range. And I saw on the TV a man. And you might recognize this man, but when I saw him, it was on January 6th. January 6th was the day that insurrectionists tried to take over the Capitol. And they were interviewing one of these insurrectionists outside of the area, outside of the commotion. And what he said was interesting. He said that he didn't want to see people in high places taking advantage of people in low places. And this struck me. Now, I don't want to draw distinct parallels, but we have the same value. Now, his value was that he didn't want to see people in high places taking advantage of people in low places. His value was in human dignity. He believed that a person had intrinsic human dignity that no one can and should take away. Now, I have the same value, but the difference is beliefs. You can think of a value as maybe a trunk of a tree, right? It's a very basic set of understandings about a way thing is. Now, a belief is like a stem to this. It's a practical application of how we manifest that value. So his value, humans have dignity. His belief, however, was that he should go to the Capitol, try to take over the Capitol to ensure that people had human dignity. Now, the difference lies in the fact that while our values were the same, my belief was that I should join an organization called Kino Teens and Kino Border Initiative and make sure that what happened to the woman in Juarez would never happen again. But something really struck me, because while I was listening to this man, I kind of had an intersection of values, and I empathized with him for just a split second. And I wondered why this was. I mean, keep in mind, we have wildly different ideologies, right? Him a Trump supporter, me a Biden supporter, him a Republican, me a Democrat, him with a Toyota Tundra, and me with a Prius. So, just a little background. But I was concerned by this. Why could I feel empathy for someone completely different than me and not feel it for a woman who needed more empathy, who needed to feel that. So I decided to take an empathy test. Was there something wrong with my empathy? And it was strange because I didn't get a good score. So I decided to do some research to find out if there was some kind of scientific chemical process that predisposed someone to being more empathetic. And what I found was the idea of mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are basically a concept. There are neurons in your brain, and when you see something, you kind of mirror the emotion that person has. So if there's a sense of calm in a room, you might feel calm too. If there's a sense of peace, you'll feel peaceful. And this goes hand in hand with mirror touch synesthesia. And I'll give an example of this because it's kind of hard to explain. When I was younger, me and my dad, he's up there, used to listen to a lot of classical music. And one of our favorite songs was a song called In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. And if you know it, you know that there's a drum solo in it. And whenever that drum solo would come on, we'd air drum to it, right? And I associate that memory, that experience, with the feeling of happiness, with felicity. So you can almost think of mirror touch synesthesia as tasting a sound. It's a stimuli that stimulates an emotion in your head. But after doing all this research, I pretty much found that there's nothing that we can do to control our chemical empathy. Yeah, some people are more empathetic, they have more mirror neurons, but we can't control it. So I began to wonder, if we couldn't actually make ourselves more empathetic, could we fake it to make it? And Brené Brown talks about this in her TED Talk. She is a psychologist, and she gives the example of a woman, a mother, coming home from work to see her daughter crying. And there's two routes that the mother could take. Either she could empathize with the daughter, talk about why she was crying, try to empathize with her, or she could not. She could just go to her work. And Brené Brown offers kind of an interesting perspective. She thinks that it's more likely that the mother would take the second route. And why is this? The answer, in short, is superiority. When the mother empathizes with the daughter, she has to reveal what the daughter is feeling. Maybe she has to tell a story of, a time when the mother was sad. Say the daughter didn't get picked at lunch, or no one sat with her at lunch. Maybe the mom will have to reveal that maybe she wasn't picked at lunch either. And she'll have to kind of break down this wall between the two. And it's interesting because no one wants to feel socially inferior. The mother picks the second route because she wants to feel socially superior. She wants to feel not vulnerable. By putting up this wall, she's making herself on the social high ground. And I'll kind of give my experience with this from my Modus retreat at Brophy. And I won't reveal too much because some of you may have not been on it yet. But on that retreat, when someone trusts you enough to tell you that they maybe have a drinking problem, to maybe tell you that they're really struggling, you can't find it in yourself to put up a wall. You need to feel vulnerable so they can feel accepted. And that satisfaction is so much greater than any wall could ever give you, that any social high ground or superiority could give you. But if we know the science of the empathy and how not to do it, how should we do it? And a great example of this, in my opinion, is the idea of social canvassing. And social canvassing is basically a method of social advocacy to promote change. So it was used in the 2016 election, and I like to contrast this with speed polling. And you might think of speed polling as going up to someone, asking, what's your belief? How do you feel about this? Who are you voting for? That's it. That's speed polling. Now, social canvassing is an honest, deep reflection of someone's beliefs, and it's very conversational. Oftentimes, the person that's being polled doesn't even know it because it's that laid back. So when a person or when a poller goes up to someone, they'll have a deep, honest discussion, and they'll try to make it two-sided too. They'll try to evoke responses, but also give a little bit of their experience. So if the issue is immigration, for example, a poller might go up to someone and say, hey, what are your views on immigration? It's not confronting, it's easy, and the person offers a response. Maybe the person polling the person would offer a response too. And from this, it's been proven that in the 2016 election, there were 3% more votes for Clinton in certain states because this method of polling was used. So it has effects. I think the peak of my empathy after learning about all of this was at an event called Walk of Mercy. But as I kind of went through all this research, I realized my fallacy with the woman in Juarez. I couldn't control my empathy because I can't change the amount of mirror neurons in my head, but it also wasn't two-sided. She was offering her full self to me. I wasn't offering anything back. I put up a wall too. I didn't want to feel socially inferior. I didn't want to make myself vulnerable to her to be able to have a real conversation. And I kind of tried to work on this at Walk of Mercy. So Walk of Mercy is an event, and schools from across the valley come together, and they're all part of an organization called Keno Border Initiative. And this is an advocacy group that brings together people from all across the nation, and they try to make decisions and influence policymakers about the issue at the border. And so our schools came together, and we talked about immigration, and this kind of shoehorned right into Education Day. And Education Day is kind of the same thing, but we talked to senators. So schools from around the valley came to Brophy, and our subject this time was to inform legislators about DACA protections for students and try to secure those protections. And when we did this, we went and talked to senators, but we ended up all coming back and conglomerating about our views and what actually happened. Now, I wasn't there, but I heard that one of my good friends, he tried to shake a senator's hand, and the senator would not shake his hand. Now, you can call this being ticked off, anger. I was furious. Imagine that. Not shaking another human being's hand because of a signature on a piece of paper. Now, through all of this kind of commotion in my head, all this turmoil, all this anger, all this rage, I began to think, is this being empathetic? Is this what it is? Is it feeling angry to people? Is it feeling sad for people? And it is. But I'll ask again, what's the point of it? Why should we have empathy? Why should we want to feel the struggle of others? No one wants to feel inferior. No one wants to have the social low ground. I did this talk because I don't know if that woman in Juarez survived. I don't know if she came back. And the least I could do was share her story. But in a world where people feel each other's struggle on a daily basis, where we know what other people go through, that's the only way we can change the world. Thank you.